Okay.
Hello and welcome to Corowned Works film number 3, featuring the disability arts movement's premier cartoonist, Mr. Dave Lupton, also known as Crippen. Crippen is somebody that I've worked with for over 20 years, but however we have never met other than on computer. However, I'm proud to call him a friend. So perhaps I can ask you to introduce yourself anyway, Dave.
Okay, Rich. My name's Dave Lupton, probably better known as Crippen, disabled cartoonist. As Richard says, we've worked on and off together for over 20 years, I think it is, mainly through Disability Arts Online, where Richard and I both do a blog, a separate blog, and we also contribute poems and cartoons, stories, articles, etc. Did you want to know a little bit about me as a person?
I think we can skip how many scandal and libels, Dave.
You don't want to know about the prison sentence?
No, thank you. But I was quite excited when you came onto our project, as I didn't really have any experience of you as a kind of poet, to an experienced cartoonist, yes. A person who contributes to our movement with your work, yes, but never ever as a kind of poet. So perhaps you can say something about that experience and your experience of Ivan's film.
Yeah, certainly. I'd heard about your project through Colin Hambrook, editor of Dow, and he suggested that I get in touch with you and asked to participate, which I did. I have done bits and pieces of poetry over the years, and I've written lyrics for various disabled artists. I've written some songs for Dennis Queen. I've written some songs for my son, Dickie, who's down in Brighton, who did a short stint live on stage, reciting poetry that we'd written together. But this was the first time I participated in a workshop specifically with other disabled poets. And I found that fascinating, listening to how each person had a different slant on the topic that we were discussing, which was the COVID pandemic. And having seen some of the other people's work, I realized that we did actually come at it from quite different aspects. I came at it quite politically. Other people came at it on more of a personal level, what the restrictions were about with regard to COVID in themselves. No, it was fascinating. I really enjoyed it. I've also seen the film that came out of this, Ivan's film, which was fascinating. It's quite interesting to see another artist take some of my work and make it into their own sort of thing. I've really enjoyed that, and that's something I want to do a lot more in the future, possibly with other poets, with other artists, a lot more collaboration, because it really provides me, certainly, with a different slant on the disability arts world, certainly. And I can see that I've been quite insular in a lot of ways, focusing on my work as Crippen. But this new avenue of poetry and prose, I can see different things developing from this, and it's quite exciting.
I think you're absolutely right that your contribution to our project was so kind of political, and that leaves us with an opportunity to talk about the social model. Perhaps you could explain what it's all about.
Yeah, I first came across the social model, must be 30 odd years ago now, getting on for 40 years, when it was in its infancy. And it was such a simple process. It really opened my eyes and opened doors for me as a disabled person. And in its very basic terms, it was saying that I wasn't the problem because I used a wheelchair. The fact that there were no ramps into a building, there were only steps. Society saw me as a problem, whereas the social model said, no, you're not the problem. The problem is with society. There should be a ramp. And the lack of ramp was seen as a physical barrier. And it was this barrier concept that really kicked me off as Crippen. When you start looking around at the barriers in society, which disable us, which makes us become a disabled person, not our impairments, it's the way society's been constructed with no thought to including disabled people, whether it's physical access, auditory, etc. But then you start to find other barriers in the language that people use. You put me on the spot here. I'm desperately trying to remember the list of barriers.
I'll refer back to it later.
Yeah, you get the idea. You get the idea.
I found it so fascinating because I had a similar experience myself. Kind of as a child, I was excluded from education on account of my health. I acquired a stammer, and I found that kind of people lacked patience, lacked tolerance, kind of assumed I was stupid. And later I had mental health issues too, and these mental health issues are something which I feel that we can include in a social model quite easily. So I think it might be a good opportunity for us now, Dave, to kind of focus on your poem. And I think I can put it up if I share screen.
Okay.
So perhaps I can ask you to read it.
Yep, okay. Yeah, I've actually got it on my notice board in front of me as well. So my eyes will be darting up and down, so forgive me for that. Would you like me to start reading it?
Yes, please.
Right. It's entitled When COVID Came. When COVID came, cutting deep, an act of ablation, children starved of education, restricting social caring's role, while do not resuscitate takes its toll. Perverting laws retrospectively, functioning at best defectively, stormtroopers in Gucci suits, grinding down in jacket boots. More cuts to benefits they append, we useless eaters view our end. As thousands die, their cries ignored, its architect is made a lord. With herd immunity as a theme, these bureaucrats fulfill their dream. The elderly and halt and lame are sacrificed, become fair game. With COVID giving them excuses, so easy dealing more abuses. It's here to stay, their fevered shout. Just think, so many rights to flout.
That's excellent. That's excellent, Dave. I think that certainly touches on two forms of barrier, kind of organisational and attitudinal. So I was particularly impressed with your description as follows: children starved of education, restricting social caring's role, well, do not resuscitate, takes its toll.
There's three separate items within that. Children starved of education. From what I remember at the time, the local authority were given permission, or they had their funds cut, whereas they didn't have to give disabled children the right to access to education during the COVID crisis. It was one of the things that got thrown out the window. The restricting social caring's role, again, during the COVID experience, if you like, Boris Johnson did away with various acts like the Care Act, etc., just tore them up. Again, instructing local authorities to hold back on offering any help or support to disabled people in the community. It was almost like the Third Reich had materialized overnight, and suddenly we'd gone from a society where there were acts of parliament in place to support disabled people and to give us a voice. They were all just torn up and thrown away because of COVID. I haven't checked to see if those acts that were torn up have been allowed back. I haven't checked that yet. I must do that. The do not resuscitate, that's sort of an ongoing thing. I've done quite a lot of work with Liz Carr. She runs an organisation which challenges the hospital's right to put a do not resuscitate above your bed when you're in a hospital. And for the life of me, I can't remember what her organisation is called. I have these blank spots in my mind, never mind. But it's basically that it was discovered that disabled people going into hospital with COVID and elderly people going into hospital with COVID automatically had a do not resuscitate label attached to them. So if the doctors or nurses felt that they deteriorated to a point where they could just cut off the oxygen supply or whatever and just let them die peacefully, in inverted commas, that was the standard. And when this was heard about, it was challenged quite forcibly by disabled people in particular, although it still went on in hospitals. We still had reports of people discovering that they had a do not resuscitate attached to their hospital notes without them having given permission for the do not resuscitate order. So those three lines in the poem just sort of give a start into three completely different areas where our rights were just taken away with COVID as the excuse. Yeah.
It reminds me of another issue, which most of us have missed out of our poetry, and that's the scandal of people with COVID being returned to care homes.
Yeah.
And it can call for an institutional destruction of disabled people's lives, particularly, I think, elderly disabled people, with what of psychiatric units, etc.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite significant that looking at what happens statistically, that 66% of people who died were actually kind of disabled people, and that's absolutely shocking.
Yeah,
And it helps me understand that you have them two references in your poem about fascism. Kind of you talk about stormtroopers, you talk about jackboots, obviously making an illusion that the kind of government and other professionals acted in a really fascistic way.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a big issue where disabled people were discharged from hospital back into the care home environment and elderly people. I mean, if you were of a conspiracy theory bent, you would think this was a massive conspiracy to reduce the number of disabled people in society. There's a strong part of me that goes along with that, and then there's another part that thinks, no, I think the medical profession, for example, were just overwhelmed by the whole thing and just didn't think. They're human beings. The same with the government, but you expect people in that sort of position to think these things through. I don't know. Part of me goes along with the conspiracy theories.
I don't think lack of thinking what excuses what happened to us. I'd like to pick up on another type of barrier, which we've also explored in connection with fascism, and that's a kind of reference to kind of useless eaters, which can reflect on kind of attitudes which surrounded us, and which enabled people to kind of increase our death count, I think, by dehumanizing us with labels.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's quite strange. I go out today, like I will go to the supermarket. I'm in my wheelchair. I wear a mask, and I'm the only one in the whole of the supermarket wearing a mask sometimes. And you pick up looks from people, and you want to go up to them and say, "Do you realise why I'm wearing a mask? I've got a chronic lung condition, and if I catch COVID, I'm dead. And it's not gone; it's still here, and you're probably breathing COVID germs over me." It's I don't know. People have stopped caring, I suppose. I mean, the message was strong. Wear a mask, protect your disabled neighbour, your elderly neighbour. Protect them from you, and that's all gone now. And everybody is in the mix. But my mother-in-law, she won't wear a mask because nobody else does. She's had COVID twice now, quite badly, and I can say to her, "Well, wear a mask." No, nobody else wears a mask. It's quite a strong social pressure, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was something else in the poem as well, or the herd immunity thing. I wrote with herd immunity as the theme. These bureaucrats fulfill their dream. I don't know if you remember, but right at the beginning, one of the scientists involved suggested that herd immunity was the way to go, and he was attacked verbally, and it was decided not to go that route. But it's as if the government have found a way of going that route of herd immunity, so that the strong in the herd survive, and the weak, including myself and yourself, are slid off the scene. Survival of the fittest. you know, dear. Yeah, one could get quite cynical about what's been happening. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it reminds me one of the labels which was applied to us, which entered legislation, was people who are extremely vulnerable, which is a complete kind of reversal of how I've been feeling since I've been an activist, since I've been an advocate, an engagement worker, and a poet. I do not feel extremely vulnerable. I feel active. I feel as if I'm a participant in society, and this was taken away from me. And also yourself and others, of course.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
It's also interesting that well, I think you've kind of led us nicely to your second poem. Has COVID has COVID gone? I don't think it has.
No. It's going to be around a while, I think.
Yes, and let's hear it anyway.
Okay. This was a sort of an afterthought, really, and it was triggered by another participant on the session, which was Cooley. I've called it "Has COVID Gone?" query. Has COVID gone? I hear you ask. I think not. The words of my friend Cooley etched into my mind. Eye of the storm. We're in the eye of the storm. Can the storm see us? And if it blinks, are we gone? So a little bit different from my first poem, but a bit more introspective.
No, I think it is a lot kind of different, even as an afterthought. But what excites me about it is your inspiration came from Cooley.
Yeah.
There's this continuing idea that in spite of COVID, in spite of lockdown, in spite of our separation from each other, we have been together and we have supported each other.
Yeah. No, that was a strong feature of the session that you ran. We were all bouncing ideas off each other, really, supporting each other. And I think it was Cooley who said or mentioned, "Are we in the eye of the storm?" And it just got me thinking, the eye, the blinking eye. So it was Cooley who really I should attribute that poem to. I think this whole thing where we've had to go online more, especially with Zoom sessions, it's made everything so much more accessible for a lot of people. I keep getting invited to meetings and openings and sessions. I've been doing some work with Manchester Museum, did some cartoons up there in conjunction with Manchester Coalition of Disabled People, and they wanted me to attend as part of the opening. But the idea of, for me, I'm on the Isle of Wight. I have to get onto a train. I then have to get on a boat. I then have to get on another train. I have to get across London, taxi presumably, or underground, and then another train. And the thought of mixing with so many people and having to wear a mask for that complete journey completely puts me off. Whereas I can sit here in the safety of my own home, be creative, talk to people like we're talking here. And it's brought more disabled people into the mixing or the melting pot, hasn't it? People who haven't participated via their computer in the past. Certainly with Disability Arts Online, there's a lot more via Zoom sessions and social media settings. So perversely, it's been a good thing. It's been a good thing, if I can say that. Good old COVID. a poem coming on, or at the very least a cartoon.
I'd like to apologise at this point to anybody watching this film. I've got some works happening outside, and people might be able to hear the hum of roadworks. I'm sorry about that. It was nice, however, Dave, to finish on a positive note that some things have improved in terms of access.
Yeah.
Right on account of our experience. And so I think that's interesting as we've now stumbled into another crisis which will be affecting all of our lives. The cost of kind of living. You mentioned Manchester. I noticed yesterday an headline that 1 in 5 disabled people in Manchester are struggling to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether you would say anything about the cost of living crisis, or if you've got something else positive you'd like to end on.
Right. I mean, Manchester Coalition is a good example. We have people involved with Manchester Coalition who were also involved with Disability Arts Online and in various other things that I get involved with. And there's a mass of support coming backwards and forwards between all these organisations. I think before there was quite a lot of separatism because of funding issues, that people were funded to perform a certain function for an area that they were in or for a group of people that they represented. And there wasn't as much collaboration, really. And yet I'm finding there's much more. There's masses of collaboration going on between disabled people from all over. I've got a commission through at the moment, believe it or not, from the World Bank. I didn't even know the World Bank existed. And they want some of my cartoons, or they want me to alter some of my cartoons around the social model because they've only just come across it and they want to learn about it. And I'm speaking to a disabled person at the World Bank who is new to the whole concept of disabled people being empowered, etc. And she's been sharing contacts with me, or vice versa, with people that I know in America. And the same within Great Britain with Manchester Coalition and various other groups and organisations in the UK. We've suddenly started to share resources and point people at funding that's available, whereas before we would grab hold of it, because we needed it more than they did, sort of thing. So yeah, that's a positive. A lot more collaboration going on between disabled people. We're becoming quite strong again in that sense.
That's excellent. I'd like to thank you for your time, Dave, and your participation. I can see I'm running out of time on Zoom. I'd just like to say that you're currently kind of revisiting your archive of 30 years' work, which you're crowdfunding for. And perhaps you'd like to tell people about your crowdfunder?
Yeah, sure. Somebody pointed out to me, I can't remember who it was, but a lot of my cartoons go back nearly 40 years when I first started as Crippen, and they reflect the disabled people's movement from back then. I did a lot of collaboration with Ken Lum. I don't know if you remember Ken from, again, Manchester Coalition. A lot of the cartoons that I came up with from discussions with him never actually got published. I just kept them as an archive. And what I did was I've slowly gone through all my archive, and there's masses of stuff which is almost like a timeline of the disabled people's movement, the challenges that we had, the identifying the barriers that we were faced with, getting used to the social model and being able to use the social model. So I started sounding around for funding, because to put my normal work aside and concentrate on this, I'm 75 now. I hope to go on for a lot longer, but again, somebody pointed out to me, I'm in my twilight years. So I thought this was quite important to try and resurrect these old cartoons. Unfortunately, they're in grayscale, black and white, and they don't hold up very well in modern modern media. So I'm having to redraw quite a lot of them, and I'm really enjoying that. The crowdfunding was another suggestion by somebody, to see if I could get some money raised to pay for my time in working on these old cartoons. And it's gone up to about £800 so far. I don't know how we would give people the link. If people are on Facebook, I'm regularly putting up items about the project on Facebook, with the link to the crowdfunding. And the crowdfunding title is Crippen and the History of the Disabled People's Movement, I think is what it is. But yeah, no, I'm still touting for cash, as it were. So
that's excellent, Dave. I'm just trying to put your crowdfunder up.
Oh, lovely, thank you.
And so people can see it. I don't know if anyone can see that.
It's not come up on my screen, no.
Okay, here we go. One, two, three.
Oh, there we go.
Crippen's History of the Disabled People's Movement.
Yeah.
That's at www.crowdfunder.co.uk/p/Crippen's History of the Disabled People's Movement.
And there are hyphens between each word on the...
Hyphens in between Crippen's History of the Disabled People's Movement.
The cartoon that came up there was one of the first ones that I did for BCODP, British Council of Disabled People, way back in 1982, 83, I think it was. And I found several others that I did for them way back again in grayscale, and so I'm redrawing them in my new style with colours and much sharper lines. But they're interesting to look at. They're quite naive in a lot of ways. I mean, as I've progressed as Crippen, I've got quite cynical and quite acerbic, quite biting in my style. Actually used the word fuck the other day, which outraged one or two people, but there you go. Yeah, this was quite a gentle cartoon compared to what I produce these days. Oh, there you go, 1981, British Council of Disabled People. And as I say, I found some for Greater Manchester, and I'm letting them have them for the archives as well. So I've got a link established with them, and as I find them and create them, they're going up to Manchester. But there's a possibility of funding. I'm in talks with a couple of organisations, which I'm not at liberty to divulge at the moment, but there is a possibility that a couple of organisations want to support me in this piece of work and allow me just to focus on this. and allow me about 6 months solid to work on resurrecting all these cartoons, which would be great. So watch this space, as they say. I'm hoping that some of the funding that's being offered or promised at the moment will materialise. But for all the people that have contributed on crowdfunding, I'm really grateful. That's been fantastic. I mean, some people I know personally, and like me, you know, they haven't got 2 coins to rub together, sort of thing. But they've made quite big contributions, and I feel very humble. It's great. And I've been able to send people out a signed cartoon for them to frame, and also a PDF of my 2023 calendar. So anybody who contributes gets both of those. I did look into getting the calendar printed, which is something I've done in the dim and distant past, but it is so expensive, and it would just wipe out any funding that I got coming in. So I'm sending people a PDF, which they can then print.
Yeah.
And if they want to go to the extreme of binding it, you know, on the top, etc. But yeah, but thanks to all those people who have contributed, and those that are going to contribute as well.
Yeah, and I'd just like to kind of end on another positive note in terms of that cartoon we saw. Kind of looking at it again, I saw quite a few of your characters that still exist. But we all survivors.
Yeah.
A lot of people who contribute, but we're all moving forward. And as we came through COVID, we will come through this cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
In the meantime, all I've got to say is, Dave, thanks a lot for your time.
My pleasure.
And I hope to meet you face to face one day.
Yeah, we might do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll frighten the life out of each other.
Yeah, how scared can we get?
Okay, Rich. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Bye.